So throughout the course of the morning, between the two services, we'll have 57 kids up front in one way or another helping lead worship, and for that we're very, very grateful. Dan Orvek was the founding pastor of Good Shepherd, served here 34 years before I got here. And one of the things Pastor Dan mentioned to me numerous times was his self-understanding of what his role here was as pastor. He likened himself to a chef in a great restaurant. He said, I wanted to start lots and lots of dishes, then invite others to help finish those dishes. Start it, let them finish it. He saw his role as igniting things, starting, getting the momentum going, handing it off to other people so he could start some new things. That's sort of the pattern of St. Paul, the early Christian missionary. He would start new ministries, get the momentum rolling, and then hand it off to others and try to then encourage from a distance, but he was always behind you. The city of Corinth is a place that Paul ministered. Corinth is in Greece. Paul went there after being treated kind of a bit harshly in Thessalonica and Philippi. His ministry in those places ended a little quicker than he had hoped. He entered Corinth thinking he might only be there for a few weeks, ended up being there for 18 months and had an impact. Preached the gospel there, started a church, introduced people to Jesus, and taught them about what it meant to follow him and follow his ways of the kingdom. Made a lot of connections with people, made a lot of friends, formed a community of people, and got the momentum going, and then handed off the church to them, and he moved on to Ephesus. But most of the people of the church in Corinth were poor and uneducated, but Paul certainly reached them. And when he left, that's when some of the burning issues began to arise. The church began to get a little cliquey. Kids know what cliques are like in schools. Tribalism and factions began to emerge in Corinth. Groups began to think, well, we have more knowledge than these other people. Our spiritual leader in this place is more important than yours. Some began to see themselves as superior to others and started treating other people as inferiors, as if they were unimportant. So disunity began to be present in a variety of ways. Their worship gatherings began to get a little interesting. Worship at the time was a full meal. Some of us have participated in dinner church, a full meal with communion as part of it. But it was the meals there, full meal, lots and lots of wine. The problem in Corinth was the working poor were still working, completing their tasks of the day, and there was a smaller subgroup who began the meal without them. They started stuffing themselves, gorging themselves. They ate all the food. There was not a crumb left. They drank all the wine. They were drunk when the poor masses arrived for the gathering. So this meal and this time of worship meant to be a banquet of open table fellowship, meant to unite, and all of a sudden there's nothing left for the poor. What kind of community is that? Self-indulgent, indifferent to others, a growing sense of elitism. What kind of Christian witness is that? We know it doesn't sound much like Jesus, so Paul set about to offer a course correction. That's what 1st and 2nd Corinthians are all about, setting people back in line, getting them back on track. The text that we read today from 1 Corinthians 13 is read at weddings. How many of you have had it read or heard it at a wedding? The word for love is not what you think. We always read 1 Corinthians 13 and think it's romantic love, but it's not. It's not even the love, philia, it's not even the love you have for your friends or for your family. What Paul uses is the word agape over and over and over. It's not romantic love at all. It's the highest hurdle of love. It's the transforming, it's the forgiving, it's the pursuing type of love that bridges gaps, brokers reconciliation in this world, opens people's eyes to people who are different from them. Agape love leaves a place at the table for even people you cannot stand, but God calls you to do that, saying something might happen by you being open. It's good to hear that story today on Super Bowl Sunday. a day that I don't really care about anymore because my team is not there. There is a football game today. But you and I know today is a day of mass consumption and great excess. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of stats out there, but one I heard is the average person watching the game will consume 2,400 calories during the game itself. The average person. You will hear stats tomorrow on the amount of pizza, wings, chips, nachos, burgers, fries, and certainly the amount of beer consumed. It will be astronomical. If history repeats itself, tomorrow antacid sales in the country will soar by 20% is what they say. And they say on average 1.5 million Americans will call in sick tomorrow. It's every person in Montgomery County and then 500,000 more. I was reading an article this week. It said very few of us will ever part the Red Sea. But most leadership in this world comes in the form of simple optimism. Hope is a nice thing, but what it says is optimism requires us to act, requires us to do something. You know, in 1990, a seminary intern named Brad Smith was serving at a Presbyterian church in South Carolina. He offered that simple prayer that we read at the very beginning of the service. And he started talking to his youth group there at the church about, hey, the Super Bowl's coming. What would happen if we looked at it a little differently? Could we turn this game into something else? So he decided, the kids in dialogue with him said, hey, let's do a collection at our church for cans of soup and collect money and just put it in a pot, see what happens, see how much we can raise. We'll donate every bit of it to the local food bank. And the kids, the light bulb went off in their head. What if we invited other people to do the same, other youth groups, and said, just wherever you are, designate it for a local food pantry or your charity of choice. 22 churches participated that first year and said they raised $5,700. Last year, the congregations that actually registered, we know there are more, participated. 4,000 groups participated, $8 million was raised. I think in your bulletin it says like $150 million on Super Bowl Sunday has been collected as part of this nationwide effort. But I think what has emerged from this simple youth group was a great alternate witness. It shines a light on a day where the world is focused on a game on an important gospel issue, which is God's concern for the poor and God's concern that people who don't have enough are taken care of. And it reminds all of us who have resources, our calling from God is to share and be generous, not just one day of our life, but on an ongoing. 2017, it's estimated that 1 in 8 Americans lived with food insecurity. Our kids studied this not long ago, but 1 out of 8 lives with food insecurity, which is defined as the lack of consistent access to enough food for an active, healthy life. 1 in 8. I'm amazed by that. We can look at the world itself, but just America alone, 1 in 8. 48 million Americans live below the poverty line. It's estimated that between 12 and 16 million kids live with food insecurity every day. And I put that number in perspective. The population estimate of Maryland, Virginia, and D.C. is about 15 million. If we put those 3 places together, that's the amount of kids living with food insecurity. So what do? Do we do nothing? Amos Oz died about five weeks ago. Didn't know who he was till recently, but he was an Israeli writer, novelist, journalist, professor of Hebrew literature, and he told a famous parable. He said, if someone sees a huge calamity, something wrong in the world, for example, a burning fire, a person has choices in how they react. Number 1, they can run away as fast as they can, get as far away as they can, leave everyone behind. Number 2, you can write an angry letter blaming someone on the fire. Or number 3, you can bring a bucket of water and throw it on the fire. And if you don't have a bucket, bring a glass. He says if you don't have a glass, Bring a teaspoon. Because everybody has a teaspoon, is what he said. And Oz said, and yes, I know a teaspoon is very, very little to deal with the burning problems of the world, but there are millions and millions of us, he said. Each of us has a teaspoon, and he invited people to join the order of the teaspoon. To see yourself as a person who realizes what you have can indeed make a difference. It may seem small, but joining with others has a huge impact. What I think Oz is calling us to was loving the world around us, and by our witness, inviting others to join in this ministry of agape love and care in the world around us. Martin Luther King said this, you've heard it time and time again, everybody can be great because everybody can serve. Some of the burning issues of the world, there are many, but one of the burning issues of the world is inequality and food insecurity in this country. We live in a county, though, which is one of the most affluent places on the planet. Most of us have way more than we will ever need. Yet we gather today, and Jesus reminds us to do something. Do something with what you have. Share, be generous. The cans we bring in today may seem like a little teaspoon effort, but indeed, you realize that just invites people to think about it more and more, to join in like serving at the Goody Drive Men's Shelter. What our kids will do in a couple weeks is the 30-hour famine. Not eat for 30 hours. And I can almost guarantee you these kids you see up front today will raise $10,000 for world hunger, for people who don't have enough. That's a gospel challenge, a gospel witness, and we're grateful for that. But realize what that witness is all about is it's about love. It's the love that Paul pointed us to. Amen.